Hello, everyone. It is Thursday, April 16th. Today is day 34 of quarantine, and today is a really big subject that I'm going to try and boil down as best I can. Today, we're talking about adding chords to your melody. Now, this is not writing out the full harmonies yet. This is just getting the chord structure that you want to go along with your melody. At this point, I haven't assigned the parts. I'm just looking at what chords go with the melody best. There's a chord based on every step of the scale, and that's going to make some of them major, some of them minor, but they're all going to sound like this. We don't have to use all those chords, and we should certainly not try to do it in that order. The most commonly used chords are the triads built on the first step, the fourth step, and the fifth step. We call that the 1, 4, and 5 chords. A lot of popular music use just these three chords, and there's nothing wrong with that. Especially if you look back into earlier rock and roll music, like of the 50s, they use these 1, 4, and 5 chords, and even a lot of jazz music. If you think of the blues progression, if you're familiar with the blues progression, that can be built just on 1, 4, and 5. There is something to note, though, when you're looking at these chords and the way we're writing them out. You're going to notice that we're going to use Roman numerals. This is just a kind of a standard practice that's built off an old system called figured bass. Originally, if my history is correct, originally figured bass was used for organists to know how to accompany musical pieces without having to write the chords out, and allowed early organists to do a lot of improvisation in coming up with their accompaniment. It's now become a system that we use for chord analysis, and we're not going to go into the whole system and how the whole thing works, but just know that the Roman numerals are pretty standard practice. You're also going to notice we're going to use lowercase and uppercase letters for those Roman numerals. Anytime you see an uppercase letter, that is indicating that it's a major chord. Anytime you see a lowercase letter, that is indicating that it is a minor chord. So there's some common chord progressions that we see in music, and there's some common ways to flow between these chords. Certain chords just tend to go to other chords, right? So if you listen to a 1, 4, 5 and then back to 1, it just feels solid and ending, right? But it's kind of complicated. So luckily, some people made some great charts to help you out. So if you look at these charts, and I'll scroll through a couple different ones here, both in major keys and minor keys, you're going to see where the chords usually go. Okay, a 1 chord, you can see, generally speaking, you can take it to whatever chord you want, and that's totally fine. But so take, for example, you can see that we can take the 1 chord to a 5 chord and then back to a 1, or we can go 1, 5, 7, 1, or we can go 1, 2, 5, 1. That's a very common jazz progression. But look, these chord graphs are going to help a lot when you're looking to come up with the chords to go with your melody. Now, there's nothing to say you can't go outside of those graphs. You can come up with whatever you want. It might be a bit more jarring. You might find that you're having a hard time when you're writing the parts out, getting the parts to move the way you want them to. But you absolutely can, and you can absolutely throw some variance into those chords. Rules in music, when it comes to writing music, they're more like suggestions, to quote Captain Jack Sparrow. It's just kind of a code. It's not a law. So you can absolutely break the rules. they're just there to help you out. And they're based off some of the commonalities we've seen out of the works of the great composers of the past. Okay, so what we're looking at here, you're seeing the chords that I've now added to my string piece. On the top line here, you see the melody that I was working out in our last video, and then it goes all the way down here. And the bottom line, the bass clef, I just slapped the chords on there. You can also see the chord symbols that I put next to it as well. So at this point, the piece sounds like this. So this is in no way finished. There's still a few things I don't like in this. I made some changes. Unfortunately, I had to try doing this recording twice, so I didn't film the changes that I made. But up here in the fourth measure, this was just a one chord, and I felt that was a bit plain and it needed a little bit more motion. So here we put a 6 chord inside of it. And over here, this was originally in the 15th measure. This was originally a 7 chord, like as it is over here when it repeats. But after listening to it for a while, I decided I didn't like that 7 chord. So I altered it to make it a 5 chord, just like the measure before it. So we'll just slap that note up. Wait. That's going to come down there. There we go. Now I've got a 5 chord here as well, just like I did in the first time. Now, it's a little boring having those 2 5 chords right next to each other. Same thing up here in the beginning where we've got those 2 1 chords and the 2 5 chords here. So I'm probably going to look to do something in between there. The nice thing is in between the 5s, you can really do a lot of things. But there's still going to be a bit of alteration. I was initially liking this 2 in the middle here because it's a little tricky going from 5, 2, and then 1. That takes your ear for a bit of a trip. But as I listen to it again, I'm not the biggest fan of it. So I'm not the biggest fan there. I'm not sure what I want to do instead. Let's see. The notes I'm looking at, I've got a D, a C, and a B. So I could instead, I could go straight to a 1, but that's a little bit boring as well. Not that there's anything wrong with that, because the 1 chord would be G, B, D, so that's going to hit this B and this D. I could do a 3 chord, which would be odd, but let's just hear what happens when we instead make that a 3 chord. So I'm going to go over here on our 3. Okay, so we got our minor 3 chord there. So now let's listen to how much that changes it, just changing that chord structure a little bit. Here we go from the beginning. So as you can see, the chord works with that measure isolated. It works, but it doesn't really work with the whole chord structure. If we start it here, it's okay. It wouldn't be awful, but I don't really like it. So I'm still going to play with that a little bit. Not exactly sure what I'm going to do. I might just make this a one chord, which you'll hear right now. We've got a one chord. That's fine. It's just pretty boring. So I don't know. Still going to play with this a bit more. Now, in the next video, we're going to take it from these chords, just these block chords underneath the melody, and we're going to start to expand it out. Again, this is going to be for violin 1, 2, viola, cello, and maybe bass. Haven't decided yet. But we're going to expand it out to cover all the parts. So in the next video, you're going to see how that process works and what kind of things you need to take care of to pay attention to when you're writing out the parts. So that is it for today's video. We see our piece has taken another step forward, and I'll see you on the next one.